Somewhere in the South China Sea, a capsule's floating. 3 parachutes dragging behind it in the water. A few miles away, a rocket booster's bobbing gently in the waves. Back on shore, a room full of engineers just pulled off something no country has ever done in a single flight. The morning of February 11th. Let me take you back to the morning, February 11, 2026. The sun is coming up over Hainan Island, this tropical stretch of land at the very southern tip of China. Humid air, palm trees swaying, fishing boats heading out for the day. Right in the middle of all that calm, sitting on a launch pad that didn't even exist 2 years ago, a rocket that's already survived more abuse than most rockets ever see in their entire lives. The Wenchang space launch site had just finished building a brand new tower for this moment, 120 meters tall, roughly a 40-story building. Construction started in April 2024 and they finished it in under 2 years. The tallest launch tower in all of China, built from scratch specifically for crewed missions to the moon. New concrete, new flame trenches, new water suppression systems. Every single piece of it untested in a real launch until today. And if any of it fails, if the flame trench can't handle the heat, if the concrete cracks under the acoustic pressure, if the water system doesn't suppress the shockwaves fast enough, the whole test is over before the rocket even clears the tower. Now, the rocket sitting on that tower, that's where the story takes a turn. This is a prototype Long March 10A. And here's the thing about it. This rocket's not new. In fact, it's the opposite of new. This exact machine had already been bolted to this exact pad twice before and fired at full power while chained down. First time was August 2025. They lit all 7 engines and let them scream for 30 seconds. 900 tons of thrust shaking the ground while the rocket stayed locked in place. The second time was September 2025. Same rocket, same engines. This time they ran them for a total of 320 seconds across 3 separate burns, simulating what a real reusable booster would need to do on an actual mission. Launch burn, re-entry burn, landing burn. 3 ignitions on 1 set of hardware in a single test session. After that second firing, a team of engineers crawled over every centimeter of the vehicle. They replaced a small number of worn parts, ran every diagnostic check in the book, and then made a decision that tells you everything you need to know about how China thinks about rockets now. They decided this machine, the one that had already survived 2 full-power ground tests, was ready to actually fly with a capsule on top, with spacesuits and test dummies strapped inside. They were betting the entire test campaign on hardware that had already been pushed to its limits twice, and they were about to push it a 3rd time. Except this time it was going to leave the ground. Most space agencies on this planet would not make that call. They'd build a fresh vehicle for the flight test, keep the ground test hardware for display or spare parts, and add another year to the schedule just to be safe. China didn't do that. They looked at the data, trusted the engineering, and rolled the dice on the same machine. That decision alone is the clearest signal of where China's rocket program is headed. They aren't building disposable hardware anymore. They're building machines that survive. Liftoff. 11 a.m. Beijing time. The countdown hits 0. 7 YF-100K engines ignite simultaneously, burning kerosene and liquid oxygen, and roughly 910 tons of thrust slam the pad. The Long March 10A lifts off from the brand new tower with the Mengzhou crew capsule riding on top. The flame trench channels the exhaust sideways. Thousands of gallons of water dump from the suppression system to absorb the acoustic shock that would shatter windows for miles. The fresh concrete holds. The steel holds. Everything that was built new for this exact second is performing exactly as designed. Smoke rolls out across the Hainan coast and the rocket punches upward through it. Inside that capsule, no living crew. Instead, humanoid dummies wearing lunar spacesuits, the same suits future astronauts will wear on the surface of the moon, strapped into seats alongside mechanical test dummies packed with sensors recording every vibration, every G-force, every temperature spike. A perfect stand-in for a human crew without a single life at risk. The rocket climbs fast through the lower atmosphere. The island shrinks below. The ocean fans out to the horizon, and everyone watching, every engineer in the control room gripping to the edge of their desk, every official monitoring from Beijing, Every analyst at NASA tracking the telemetry feed in real time, they all know what's about to happen. China didn't design this flight to go smoothly. They designed it to go wrong on purpose, at the worst possible moment, to find out if their crew could survive it. Max Q. There's a point during every rocket launch where the vehicle takes more punishment than at any other moment in the entire flight. It's called Max Q, short for maximum dynamic pressure. Here's how it works. When a rocket first lifts off, it's moving slowly through thick air. As it climbs, the air thins out, but the rocket's also accelerating, going faster every second. There's a crossing point where speed and air density combine to slam the vehicle with the greatest aerodynamic force it will experience during the entire ascent. Every weld, every bolt, every structural panel is being pushed to the edge of what it can handle. If you're an astronaut sitting on top of this thing and something goes catastrophically wrong, this is the worst time for it to happen. You're in deep atmosphere, moving fast, and the forces trying to rip the vehicle apart are at their absolute peak. China chose this exact moment on purpose. Right at Max Q, the command goes out from mission control. The Mengzhou capsule fires its escape motors. The capsule rips away from the booster, pulling hard, punching through the air that's trying to tear it apart. If these motors misfire or the separation angle drifts even slightly, the capsule tumbles and the test dummies standing in for a living crew are finished. There's no second chance at Max Q. You get it right or you don't. There's no in between. The capsule clears the rocket. It arcs up, slows, and starts falling. 3 massive parachutes bloom open, covering 2,400 square meters of canopy, and the capsule drifts down toward the South China Sea. Recovery ships are already racing toward the splashdown zone, and by 12:20 in the afternoon, the capsule's out of the water and sitting on the deck of a rescue ship. China's first ever ocean recovery of a crew capsule. A milestone for any space program on the planet, and for China, this was just the first half of the test. The booster comes home. Because while that capsule was floating down under parachutes, the rocket was still flying. Nobody in the control room was celebrating yet. Half the mission was still in the air. After the capsule tore away, the Long March 10A first stage kept climbing, kept following its programmed trajectory, reached about 105 kilometers altitude, and then it did something that would have sounded like pure fantasy a decade ago. It turned itself around, oriented its engines toward the ground, and started coming back. A controlled descent using grid fins to steer through the atmosphere like a skydiver adjusting body position in a free fall. Bleeding speed with every passing second, correcting angle constantly, guiding itself toward one specific patch of ocean where recovery ships were already circling. Then it splashed down in the designated zone, upright and intact. Recovery ships sailed in and retrieved it days later, bringing it back to shore in one piece. China's first ever ocean recovery of a rocket first stage. The same rocket that had been fired on the ground in August, fired again in September, and launched for real in February was now sitting on the deck of a ship heading back to port. The booster had hook mechanisms designed for a future wire-based capture system. Imagine a trapeze act where the rocket deploys hooks that grab onto tensioned wires stretched across a landing platform. A completely different approach from the SpaceX tower catch method. This splashdown was proof of concept. Future flights will use the wire system to land on solid ground or a ship at sea. What actually just happened? So step back and look at this from a distance. In one single flight, China tested a crew capsule aboard at the deadliest moment of launch. They recovered that capsule from the ocean for the first time ever. They flew the booster through a controlled return and recovered that from the ocean too. 2 tests, 1 flight. NASA tested the Orion aboard on its own dedicated separate mission. SpaceX tested the Dragon Abort the same way. China combined both into one launch on hardware they'd already test-fired twice, and every piece of it worked. The race. You need to understand the timeline now because the timeline's the entire story. There's a finish line and both countries can see it. China's aiming to land astronauts on the moon before 2030. That's 4 years away. 4 years is roughly the time it takes to get through college. That's the window. And China is hitting every checkpoint with no major delays and no major failures. Pad abort tests in 2025, done. Lander verification tests in 2025, done. Static fire tests in 2025, done. Combined flight tests in early 2026, also done. The checklist is getting shorter and every remaining item has a date on it. Meanwhile, America's Artemis program keeps sliding. Artemis 3, the mission that was supposed to land Americans on the moon for the first time since 1972, has been pushed back again and again. Current target is a 2027 lunar orbit mission with no landing. China is accelerating while America's rescheduling, and in a race, consistency beats ambition every single time. Under the hood, the full Long March 10 for lunar mission stands 92 meters tall with a core stage and 2 boosters, all 5 meters in diameter, producing roughly 2,678 tons of thrust from 21 engines. The February test used the 10A single-core variant. The YF-100K engine puts out 130 tons of thrust each, throttles between 50 and 105% for precision booster landing. In June 2024, they fired 3 together at 382 tons of thrust. By February 2026, they were flying 7 on hardware tested twice already. The money problem. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. The United States Space Launch System, the SLS, is completely expendable. Every flight throws away the entire rocket. Each launch runs over $2 billion. Some estimates push closer to $4 billion. China's building a rocket designed to fly home and fly again. Reusability is the difference between visiting the moon for photos and building permanent infrastructure there. The vehicles. The Mengzhou capsule, meaning dream vessel, is about 9 meters long, weighs 22 tons, carries 3 to 7 crew. Heat shield handles reentry at 9 kilometers per second. The reentry module is built to be reused across multiple missions. The Lunar lander, meaning embracing the moon, weighs 26 tons, carries 2 astronauts and a 200-kilogram rover. Tested in August 2025 on exogravity test towers at 1/6 Earth's gravity, verifying guidance, navigation, and control systems. The mission uses a dual launch architecture. 2 Long March 10s, one with the lander, one with the crew. They rendezvous and dock in lunar orbit. 2 astronauts descend. After the surface mission, the ascent stage brings them back. What is on the moon? Now, here's where this stops being a space story and starts being your story. The moon has resources that could reshape the global economy, and whoever gets there first holds the leverage. Helium-3. The sun has been blasting solar wind at the moon for 4.5 billion years, and because the moon has zero magnetic field to block it, a rare isotope called helium-3 has been soaking into the lunar soil grain by grain for all that time. Earth barely has any because our magnetic field acts like a shield, deflecting most of the solar wind before it even gets close to the surface. The moon's been sitting there exposed and unprotected for longer than complex life has existed on Earth, absorbing helium-3 the entire time. Estimates go up to 1 million tons of it sitting in the top layer of soil across the entire lunar surface. And here's why that matters so much. Helium-3 is one of the best fuels for nuclear fusion, same reaction that powers the sun. Current fusion research uses deuterium and tritium, which work but produce a lot of fast neutrons and some radioactive waste. Helium-3 fusion produces almost no radioactive waste and far fewer dangerous neutrons. A single ton could power a major American city for an entire year. Think about that for a second. 1 ton, 1 city, 1 year. And there could be millions of tons of it just sitting there in the dirt. Whoever cracks large-scale harvesting holds the key to the cleanest energy source humanity's ever known, and right now China's building the hardware to get there first. Water ice sits in permanently shadowed craters at the lunar South Pole. Billions of tons of it, locked in darkness where the temperature is colder than the surface of Pluto. Some of these craters haven't seen sunlight in over 2 billion years. Split that ice into hydrogen and oxygen and you get rocket propellants. A base with water access becomes a refueling station for the solar system. Mars missions get cheaper. Deep space probes become practical. The moon stops being a destination and starts being a gas station on the highway to everywhere else. China's Chang'e 7 in 2026 and Chang'e 8 in 2028 are heading straight for the South Pole. Then there are the carbon nanotubes found in Chang'e 6 samples from the far side. Incredibly strong, incredibly light structures previously only made in specialized laboratories. Finding them on the moon could transform materials science, lighter spacecraft, stronger composites, maybe even space elevators. If China patents extraction methods, companies like Boeing and SpaceX face real barriers. The new Cold War. China and Russia are building the International Lunar Research Station, the ILRS Basic Outpost, by 2035. Full expansion by 2045 with a nuclear reactor for the 2-week lunar night when every solar panel on the moon sits in total darkness doing absolutely nothing. Over 50 countries want in on this project, including the United Arab Emirates, Pakistan, and nations across 3 continents. That's a coalition being assembled in real time, country by country, handshake by handshake, and America is not at the table. The United States is locked out by the Wolf Amendment, a law that blocks NASA from cooperating with China without explicit congressional approval. So America runs its own program under the Artemis Accords with allied nations. 2 camps forming, 2 separate visions for who gets to access the moon and who writes the rules. If that dynamic feels familiar, it should. That's the Cold War playbook with a lunar address, and the stakes are higher this time because trillions of dollars in resources are sitting at the finish line. The American space economy generates $241 billion a year. GPS, national defense, communications, financial markets, all running through space. China's military-civil fusion strategy means every civilian rocket advance feeds into intercontinental ballistic missile capability. The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 bans sovereignty claims, but says nothing clear about resource extraction rights. Build permanent infrastructure and control access, and you have a territorial claim in everything except name. The American wildcard. Experts say China could overtake the United States in space capability within 5 to 10 years if current trends hold. It's not a talking point designed to scare you. It's a timeline based on spending, launch cadence, and technology development. America's biggest card right now is SpaceX and the Starship program, which promises massive payload capacity and full rapid reusability at a scale nobody else on Earth is even attempting. If Starship delivers on time and works as designed, America keeps a comfortable lead and the math changes in our favor overnight. If Starship stumbles or runs into serious regulatory and technical setbacks, the gap closes fast, and China's steady march starts to look like a commanding lead. Blue Origin, Rocket Lab, and a growing roster of commercial players add depth and flexibility that China's government-run model simply lacks. America's edge has always been innovation driven by competition. The ability to let many companies try different approaches and let the winners rise. The real question is whether the edge holds against a competitor pouring tens of billions into one focused plan, executing it with discipline, and operating with the kind of political stability that lets him plan in decades instead of election cycles. That February morning lasted a few minutes from engine start to splashdown. 1 flight, 2 ocean recoveries, every objective met. China is checking boxes on schedule, and everyone is a step toward a crewed lunar landing before this decade ends. This is the new space race. The finish line is the lunar surface.